And could we have Louise Edwards, Canterbury Community Trust? Oh, we can keep the pictures going, can't we?
Kia ora, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. I feel a little bit like I've got the late Friday afternoon graveyard shift, but anyway. My name is Louise Edwards and I have the great privilege of being the Chief Executive of the Canterbury Community Trust. The Canterbury Community Trust was set up 28 years ago from the sale of the Canterbury Savings Bank, and that money was put into trust for the community. Over the past 28 years, we put more than $300 million into the Canterbury community. In the last financial year alone, we funded over $18 million into the community for everything covering sport, health, young people, arts, heritage, education, community and economic development, environment and social services. We share many of the same goals as council, and that's building a strong and vibrant community. We also co-fund many of the same organisations and projects which council funds, such as swimming pools, community facilities, community events and festivals and community groups, and we work really closely with council staff, sharing information and working on partnership funding. Our submission relates to the proposed reduction in community funding. I was going to talk about the key points in our written submission, but given that council is now not going ahead with this funding reduction, I'd just like to focus on a couple of key points. The Trust and Council fund many of the same organisations, and the proposed reduction in community funding would have had significant adverse effects. I realise Council has many competing demands, and I understand the financial challenges for the Council. I just want to emphasise the importance of Council funding for many community groups who rely on that funding. Any reduction in funding or change in the funding model needs to have a transparent, collaborative, evidence-based and strategic process to result in fair and just outcomes. Thank you all for having me today, and I wish you lots of luck in your deliberations.
Raf.
Thanks, Louise, for coming in on a Friday afternoon. Hey, look, quick question. Obviously, you guys do a great job, and you know this sector inside out. That's clear, just in terms of the sums that you disperse. Should council consider actually partnering with you or getting you to do a lot of the work that we do? Because it seems like we duplicate and fund exactly the same organisations you do, and we run the overhead to do that. Does that make any sense?
Really happy to have those discussions with you, and I think that that's something not just particular to Council and the Canterbury Community Trust. I think funders as a whole could work together a lot easier to save on overheads for assessment processes and also to make it easier for applicants to apply for funding.
Because we say that to the NGO sector, and I think actually there was one group that came in and said there was some astronomical number of NGOs, as if that was a good thing, because you can just imagine all the admin and setting up of trusts, and crikey, that just eats up so many resources. So we're asking them to be a bit smarter how they deliver their services, and we should probably be a bit smarter of how we deliver the funding.
Really agree with you there, Raf, and I think funders can do a lot more in working together.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, great. Now, there was somebody over here that had their hand up. Phil? Well, he wasn't actually, but you were next. Oh, no, you're always doing
Okay, look, my question, I have got a question. Look, just...
There's plenty of time.
Under the key issues, you've got reference to the social policy research and the correlation between reductions in local government spending and social deprivation. So is that something? Is the your funding criteria, is that kind of like attached or aligned to that kind of or the outcomes of that research?
I wouldn't say we're that far advanced yet, but we're certainly looking to use research more to be more strategic about where our funding goes. We've got a limited pot of money, so we've got to be careful to make sure that we get the best outcomes for that money. So where are the gaps? What does government fund? What does council fund? Where are the gaps that the Canterbury Community Trust fits in, and how do we get best bang for our buck and get the best outcomes for the community? And we're still in the early stages of that journey and making sure that we highlight what our funding priorities are for applicants.
Just a so that would be an example where, in fact, clearly you obviously already have a partnership with council by discussing that with our staff, and in terms of how that funding, your funding and ours is directed.
Absolutely, and we commission research as well, and we're very open to sharing the results of that research as well with other funders.
Thanks, Louise.
Yanni.
Thank you for taking the time to come in and make this submission. We've had a lot of groups talk about the lack of affordable community space in the central city and are quite concerned about the high level of rent increases that they're facing if they're not already paying high levels of rent. So I just wondered if you're doing any work around affordable community space in the central city and whether you've considered the rebuilding of a community house that's publicly owned to try and mitigate some of those factors.
That's a question that we have debated quite a lot. We're still, like many people and organisations throughout the city, waiting for our insurance proceeds on the old community house, so we haven't got those yet. We have helped fund the new community house, so we've helped with fit out and various grants to help get them set up. We've also taken up your point about increased rental for community groups. We're one of the few funders that does actually fund for overheads, rent, salaries, administration, and we've had to take that into account with applicants putting in for grant funding. In terms of recreating the model, there is a new community house that's up and running. I don't think we'll be looking at replicating that or doing another one alongside that.
Then is, like, in the medium to long term, the sustainability of us or you as a funder paying more and more expensive rents. It's a bit like the accommodation supplement. Our budgets aren't increasing. We've got really serious financial constraints, as I'm sure you do, but if our money's not going up and rents are going through the roof, that we actually aren't helping those community groups because we can no longer fund their
I guess we just have to be careful. We fund 1,300 organisations and they're not all going to fit into one community house. No. So we need to be careful about equity and fairness across all of our funding groups. But it's certainly something that's on the table and often debated by my trustees.
Vicky.
Hi Louise, and just huge thank you for all that you do because it is amazing. I just wondered by any chance if there was any money left in the Need Help Now fund.
There is, Vicky.
Cool.
Not a huge amount, but.
In terms of just a sort of kind of follow up to a couple of the questions. I mean, obviously, you've got a large number of investments, and it is the revenue off those investments that actually enable you to distribute as well as run your organisation. And I'm just wondering, I presume I could look it up if I looked at your annual accounts, but what is your rate of return on those? You've got $530 million invested. What's your rate of return on that?
Of course, it varies year by year, but not announced yet, but our rate of return for last year was 12%.
Right.
So in some years we have good years, and other years it's further down. So we have to make sure that we build up reserves for the bad years, and we've also got a reasonably conservatively invested portfolio because many groups rely on us obviously for the ongoing viability. So we can't suddenly, if we have a bad financial year, suddenly close up shop and say no grants this year. So we certainly try to keep up a stable and consistent donation base.
But that's actually quite a significant rate of return.
It is.
Certainly if we look at our own asset base and look at our rate of return at the moment, it's nothing like that. So it's just food for thought, I think. So, yeah, thank you. And as Vicky said, thank you for all that you do. I know that a lot of community groups are very reliant on that resource, and I think the more we do collaboratively, the more that we'll actually be able to do because we're working together. So thank you very much.
I certainly agree with that.
Thank you.